Hi, my name is Brooke, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to be a better ally to people with disabilities by building accessible web applications. I was a UI engineer on the design systems team, and I'd been working for around the last 2.5 years to make sure that we were developing an accessible library of React components that were deployed throughout the MongoDB ecosystem. After this talk, you will have a better understanding of why we need to build accessible web applications, and I'll share some best practices with you around implementing accessibility in your own projects. What is web accessibility? Well, you've probably heard of the term web accessibility before, but before I get too far ahead, I want to make sure we're all aligned on the same definition. Web accessibility is when websites, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. Web accessibility encompasses auditory, cognitive, neurological, physical, speech, and visual disabilities. And so you might be wondering, why does this matter so much? Well, imagine if you couldn't pay your bills on time because you couldn't navigate the platform on which you were supposed to enter your information. Or, on a much lighter note, imagine if you thought you recognized an actor from somewhere while watching a movie, but couldn't access the search engine where you might find out how you know them. The internet has become an increasingly important part of many aspects of life: education, employment, government, commerce, healthcare. And level of ability should not be a barrier in terms of getting to participate in these systems. Fundamentally, the internet offers unprecedented access to information, and everyone should get that same access. So why am I talking about this to you in this room? Well, as developers, the way in which we build things can be the deciding factor in terms of enabling users to do the things that they need to do on our platforms. As developers, it is our job to ensure that we're creating equal access and opportunity to everyone, regardless of ability. There's also a business case for improving accessibility. For one, it enhances brand. Corporate social responsibility is becoming increasingly important to both consumers and employees. And as a company who prioritizes accessibility and inclusion, you're likely to get more loyal customers and a more diverse employee base. It also drives innovation. Thinking about accessibility forces you to broaden how you approach business problems, and those who consider a wider variety of solutions are likely to make improvements that impact more customers than just the disabled population. For example, businesses that considered accessibility were more prepared for the mobile-first transition because they'd already thought about how people might be interacting with their web apps without a mouse. It can help you increase market reach. At least 1 billion people, 15% of the world's population, have a recognized disability. It's a lot of people. And globally, the extended market reach is estimated at about $6.9 trillion in annual disposable income. And finally, it can help you mitigate legal risk. Many countries have laws requiring digital accessibility, and the issue is of increased legal concern. And as digital platforms are increasingly being considered public accommodations, they're subject to the standards put forth by the ADA. As some of you may know, Domino's was sued 2 years ago by a blind person who was unable to place an order for delivery online, and that person won. This precedent is helping to pave the way for other similar cases, such that by not considering accessibility initiatives, businesses are opening themselves up to big legal risk. So how can we build better? I'm going to talk about accessibility best practices through the lens of the 4 principles of accessibility: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. The first is perceivable. Perceivable means being able to perceive what is going on the page. One strategy is to make sure your web content is perceived correctly. One strategy to make sure your web content is perceived correctly is by ensuring your images are accessible to everyone, even if they can't see the screen. For example, if someone is unable to read an image on a screen reader will read the text associated with the image via the alt attribute on the image element. The source string, likely a file path or URL, isn't particularly evocative of what's going on in the image. The alt text should be a small string of text that describes what's going on in the picture. It can be easy to overlook adding this descriptor to an image tag, but you can enforce the behavior by requiring the prop either through a TypeScript interface, as seen above, or React prop types, as seen below. Operable, the second principle, means that a user should be able to operate a website. One manifestation of this is being able to navigate and access a website through a keyboard only, as in without a mouse. That means that interactive elements should be able to receive focus, and it can also mean that you as a developer need to manage focus state based on how a user is utilizing their keyboard. One instance of necessary manual focus management is in select dropdowns. With select dropdowns, on enter, a dropdown should open and the focus should move to the first element, as seen in the first case block. On escape, the dropdown should close. And when a user presses the arrow keys, the focus should move up and down respectively. In this function, we're responding to a keyword event and then calling another function that will update state with a given element that should receive focus. So on the previous slide, I showed how a function that is responsible for responding to specific keyboard events. Now, we can use that information to manually set focus on a given element. Here, we have a useEffect hook that is listening for changes on a component's shouldFocus prop. Once that shouldFocus prop becomes true, we know we have to manually focus the given element. The best method to do manual focus manually focus an element in React is by adding a reference to an HTML element and then calling the .focus method on that referenced element. I know this is just a quick overview here, but I have an article linked in later slides that can dive deeper into this tactic of focus management. So here you can see some of what that focus management logic looks like in action, where a user is able to toggle the focused element by using the arrow keys. Understandable, the third principle, means a lot of things. It can mean predictable behavior when a user performs an action, but it can also mean having common elements throughout a web platform. And navigation is a great example of this. Recently, at MongoDB, we revamped our navigation system to better unify our cloud products and better contextualize a user within our MongoDB ecosystem. So here's an example of that and how all the interactive elements are focusable. Robust, the final principle, means ensuring a user will have the same experience of your web application no matter how they are accessing it. Different browsers, different assistive devices, different geolocations. One way to standardize this experience is by deploying the right ARIA rules to describe your HTML. And I really want to underscore right ARIA rules here because using the wrong ARIA rules can be worse than using no ARIA rules at all. ARIA rules are used to expose extra information to a browser's accessibility API. For example, here, the ARIA tab rule on the middle two buttons indicates an interactive element inside of a tab list, highlighted at the top, that, when activated, displays its associated tab panel, highlighted at the bottom. And this is an example of what that might look like in a React component. Finally, this is an example of what it might look like in the rendered version. Now that I've given you an overview of the 4 principles of accessibility, I want to talk about how you can help improve your accessibility mindset while you're developing your code. The first tool is ESLint plugin JSX Ally, which is a static analysis tool that helps point out accessibility issues while you are writing code. The second is JustAx, a custom Just matcher for an accessibility testing engine that tests user interfaces for accessibility errors. It can help you to automate your accessibility testing. Axe is an accessibility testing engine itself, but has a browser extension that tests web apps and offers solutions based on a rendered version of your application in the browser. Finally, there's also Lighthouse, which can be run from the command line or through Chrome DevTools, and it audits a web page for many things, performance, SEO, and also for accessibility. Finally, you can use screen readers or other assistive technologies that people may use to operate your websites to manually test your website. And I wanted to leave you with some further reading. When building your own web applications, here are some resources that can be useful in terms of understanding the nuances of implementing ARIA rules and understanding expected behavior of specific components. WAI ARIA provides information on how to use ARIA rules to create accessible, rich internet applications. This documentation breaks down the expected roles and keyboard navigation patterns for a variety of HTML patterns. Accessibility in React is a Mozilla guide that dives into how to manage focus in a React application. This is the link that I referenced earlier. Finally, the React docs also cover accessibility and provide best practices for implementing React in an accessible way in your applications. Thank you for listening. I hope you feel empowered to build web applications that deliver a better experience to disabled people on the internet. Thank you again.